All right. Well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon. Welcome to Investing 2030, redefining the future of ROI. My name is Michelle Avalos, and I have the honor of serving as the Deputy Director at Impact Hub Houston. Together with our CEO and Executive Director, Grace Rodriguez, we want to thank you for joining today's conversation. For those who are not familiar with Impact Hub Houston, we are a locally rooted, globally connected SDG incubator that inspires, connects, and empowers people working to solve the most pressing issues of our region and beyond, especially those that impact historically disadvantaged communities. We work alongside 100 plus impact hubs in over 55 countries. We are the world's largest community recognized by the United Nations for accelerating entrepreneurial solutions towards measurable and scalable impact for the Sustainable Development Goals. Impact Hub Houston offers intentional, inclusive, and international support to help diverse innovators like me and you, an idea to early stage startups to create the change they want to see in the world. Our main topic for conversation today is around impact investing. Over 10 years ago, JPMorgan and the Rockefeller Foundation, together with the Global Impact Investing Network, published a report claiming that impact investing was an emerging asset class that would reach between $400 billion and $1 trillion in assets by 2020. Well, last year, 2020 arrived, and the Global Impact Investing Network reported that the market had actually reached $715 billion in assets under management, while the International Finance Corporation actually estimates it was even higher at 2.1 trillion. Impact investing is no longer just a philanthropic gesture to support ventures, but a massive movement to transform return on investment, ROI, to return on impact. So as we go through today's conversation, I want all of you to have this question top of mind. What might impact investing look like by 2030? The Impact Hub Houston Investing Summit aims to provide a window into this future, where a surge of entrepreneurs are developing local and global solutions intersects with the next generation of funders that are implementing triple bottom line investments with environmental, social, and governance lens. To kick off this discussion, we've invited representatives from impact hubs in Baltimore, Minneapolis, and Monterrey to share with us how they are spurring investor interest in impact ventures, how they're facilitating access to funding for their communities, and supporting alternative funding vehicles / new paths to equitable business ownership and growth. This is a very topic that is super near to my heart. And when I first transitioned from corporate America into the social impact space, impact investing was actually one of the first conversations that I was a part of. To be completely honest, I still don't understand it. And that's also why we're hosting this event. We're trying to make this conversation more accessible to people in the community across all spectrums, across all industries, because if we do this right, we actually have the power to create, to really define and refine what impact investing should look like, from starting with the core element, our strongest foundation, which is our community. And you all get to be a part of that. So as we go through the conversation and as we jump into hearing more from our guests today, I encourage all of you to please drop any comments that you might have, any feedback, any questions in the chat, whether it be through our Zoom or through Hublio, and be part of the conversation. We really do invite you to be a part of this. Take notes. We'll do a Q&A session at the end of this panel, and then we'll have throughout the day several opportunities to network with each other through breakout rooms, and we'll just continue the conversation on until the end of the day. So with that, I would love to introduce our first speaker coming to us, Miss Terry from Minneapolis, our Impact Hub there. Terry is one of the co-founders, and she has such an impressive resume that I can't even try to do it justice. So Terry, I'm actually going to invite you to go ahead and take the stage and talk us through a little bit about the work that you're doing locally. And then after Terry is done, we'll move on to some of our other guests today.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to share what we're doing in Minneapolis-St. Paul. The way that we position what we're doing is partnering with member organizations who themselves are working in impact investing. And so what I want to do is give you a few examples. Here's a little bit about my background. Right now, I'm co-founder of the Impact Hub in Minneapolis-St. Paul. We opened in 2015. Um, and I'm one of the lead volunteers in managing the training we do here. I'm also principal at Cogent Consulting, and that's a consulting firm that's helping investors switch to impact investing and helping social enterprises gain access to impact investing that they might not be able to get otherwise. So my two worlds have merged in this presentation. I'm also adjunct instructor at the Carlson School of Business, and I mostly focus on teaching startup and advising social entrepreneurs there. And I'm co-author of a book on social entrepreneurship, from idea to a viable launch. So I've been embedded in this world for a couple decades now, and that's really helped me be able to help Impact Hub do this work. Impact Hub Minneapolis-St. Paul sees our role is collaboration facilitation. So we work to help individual entities figure out how they can work better together, connecting entrepreneurs with investor organizations, and we monitor closely as new investor organizations emerge and new groups of investors are looking at how to be more engaged with mission-driven strategies. We help connect our members and help those investors understand more about what social enterprises are like. We host events and we provide logistics support for those kinds of events. I'm going to speak about two of our tenants right now who are both impact investing entities, and their offices are in our space. We facilitate synergy, and those of you that work at impact hubs know the wonder of just having people be in the same space and know they're both all working on the same kind of make the world a better place kind of mission, and that deepens their ability to be able to share what they're working on and get ideas from one another to move forward. I also teach a master class for venture development. It's a 10-part series that's a modification of what I teach at the business school. And we also have at various points been fiscal host for specific kinds of projects that wouldn't be able to go forward without our help. So those are kind of the roles we've been playing now for the last 5 years. I just want to feature a couple of the key partners we have. One is Social Venture Circle. This is a national organization, and it has been in existence for a pretty long time. It is an association of primarily of investors who have a membership fee they pay to join, and then Social Venture Circle helps introduce them to entrepreneur opportunities in a series of presentations. Staff vets the ventures so that they are ready to be presented to investors, and the investors themselves get to make the decision about what they want to, whether they want to invest or not. What we're doing with them now is building a Minnesota base for them so that there is a cohort of investors from Minnesota that will be able to act on behalf of our locale. NDN Collective is one of our tenants. This is a native development organization, and they have offices in our Impact Hub. A subset of their work is a Native Community Development Financial Institution. It's a CDFI with an extra layer of commitment to work with Native businesses and tribal leaders to do anything from pre-development, bridge loans, large scale, regenerative development that's focused on improving the lands and resources in tribal-owned lands. And they also are doing a lot of stimulus of native launched entrepreneurial ventures. They are they're founded in South Dakota and are moving into Minnesota, and we're helping them get depth of connections here in our region. Ven Foundation is another organization that has been part of this Impact Hub since the beginning. It was formed by an individual who recognized that there was a tool called program related investments that only foundations have the capacity to distribute, but foundations weren't doing very much with it. A program related investment is foundations are allowed to make an investment in a for profit entity as long as its purpose is aligned with the mission of what the foundation does with its philanthropy. And they can take it out of the 95% of their dollars that are sitting in the asset pool continuing to build for a foundation. So, and more foundations are beginning to recognize program related investments as a real possibility for them to engage in their community. Ven Foundation has created a mechanism that will accept donations or program related investments. And then it does individual contracts with possible entrepreneur opportunities so that so the donor or the investor can choose, oh, I want to support entity X, I want to support entity Y with my dollars. And these are loan investments that once they're returned, they get recycled through the Ven Foundation, being able to redistribute those funds. It's a really interesting model. It's been developing for the last 3 or 4 years. They finally reached $1 million in donations and being able to reinvest. So that's the Ven Foundation. The other thing I just wanted to describe that we're working on is actually helping to build the impact investing ecosystem in the Twin Cities. And this is a partnership between Cogent Consulting, that I'm a principal at, and Impact Hub. And together we began convening impact focused advisors who were looking for a place where they could meet one another that was neutral, where they could begin to have the conversation with one another about how do we do this job? How do we begin to figure out how to help investors understand they could make an impact in a different way? And then how can we convince our employers, if they were in bigger organizations, to grow the opportunities that are offered to the investors that they support? This ecosystem work, we identified who all the players were in the ecosystem of impact investing. We also figured out what the gaps were that needed to be filled, and have cooperatively identified what the gaps are, and people who step up and say, I'm really interested in working on that. We've been able to nurture the kind of psychological and champion support they need to thrive. Ven Foundation was one of the gap fillers that emerged from our work. And this is the next slide. This is what our map looks like. It actually is at cogentconsulting.net. But the map, we specifically identified who are the players, what role do they play, and it's an interactive map so that you can click on a dot and it'll begin to show who they fund, who they've been engaged with, what connections they have. And our intention is in another year or so is to revisit this, because we did this about almost 4 years ago now, and it's going to be time to revisit it. So that's kind of the work that we're doing in the Twin Cities. It emerged just by people finding us as a neutral space that they could come and have conversations about how can we get better at making impact. And like the first slide said, the roles we play are collaboration and support, logistics, helping them to convene. Sometimes with this project, we did get a research grant, and Impact Hub was the fiscal agent for that grant. So with that, I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Terry.
You're
Wow.
welcome.
So one of the things I love is that y'all seem to be hitting all the areas already of what could be with impact investing. And I especially want to chat a little bit more in the Q&A about the program-based investing. I'm super interested in that. I think that's something that in our Houston ecosystem would be very, very interesting for a lot of
Okay.
folks that are plugged into various startup development organizations and other small business type of organizations. So thank you so much, Terry, for sharing. Up next, we please join me in welcoming Michelle Gaze. Michelle is also co-founder of an impact hub, this one based in Baltimore. So Michelle, if you could please join us on stage, and I'll pass the mic over to you.
So yeah, I'm here representing the incredible city of Baltimore and our Impact Hub team and community. I'm a co-founder and executive director of Impact Hub Baltimore, and also just really honored to be here with you all today. Really appreciate the invitation from the team in Houston. The whole panel and conversation are really near and dear to us and to our mission here in Baltimore. From the very first days that we were building out our community, we've been focused on access to resources for mission-driven and underinvested entrepreneurs. We've been focused on the core belief that it really takes all of our time and talents as a city to reverse patterns of disinvestment that are very deeply rooted here, and also to build an economy that is vibrant and healthy and really driving opportunity for all of our city residents. There we go. Impact Hub worldwide are all known for having co-working spaces and programmings and these sorts of things that directly serve entrepreneurs and sort of provide infrastructure for them to grow and thrive. So we see our co-working space that we run as a container for aggregating resources all in one place and aggregating people that can really benefit from connections with one another. A lot of what Terry said resonated in terms of how we see our role in the local ecosystem. And so what that means is we're investing a lot of our time into the entrepreneurs themselves because we're in a typical year bumping into them all the time, a little less in 2020. But it also means that we're really focused on building the conditions for those social entrepreneurs to be successful and to be able to grow and thrive. And so we're often working in partnership with other folks in Baltimore who are like-minded and share those goals, so that it all adds up to being a healthier ecosystem that really drives equitable economic development. And so we're engaging a lot of stakeholders really every week and every day in our work. So I'm going to be sharing examples from Baltimore that just embody the types of investments that inspire our team and drive real impact in our city. I thought it might be first helpful to just describe a little how we define impact or how we think about it, which is, it shows in this model. I won't go through every piece of this, but essentially this is the framework that we use to talk about civic wealth and building civic wealth. And the key thing to focus on in this slide is that civic wealth really happens at the intersection of enterprises, local institutions, and communities. And each one of those parties and players brings a unique set of skills and values to the table. And it really takes sort of all of those talents combined together to grow civic wealth in the city. And so the sort of impact investment mechanisms that I'm going to share with you today, and examples from our space and also from partners, are all operating in this way that both look to grow individual enterprises, but also try to build new pools of resources at local institutions and long-term assets that really foster a sense of belonging in the larger community. So the first example that I'm going to share is called Baltimore Together. It was convened this year by our local economic development agency, the Baltimore Development Corporation. This past year, the BDC, for short, was convening weekly coordinating meetings with Impact Hub Baltimore, as well as about 15 of our local partners, a mix of entrepreneur support organizations that provide technical assistance to Black and Brown businesses in particular, CDFIs who were, there's a handful in town, but they wanted to be building sort of stronger relationships with technical assistance partners, and then also grassroots partners who have a lot of reach into and are rooted in neighborhoods in the city and in specific communities. So those partners were all coming together to provide technical assistance for small businesses seeking COVID relief and support. The Technical Assistance Network itself was actually conceived prior to COVID-19, hosted out of the Annie Casey Foundation and funded by a coalition of local and national partners, with the idea of bringing all of those types of partners around the table to really improve the pipeline of support for entrepreneurs. We were going to do our kickoff meeting in March, and everyone knows what happened in March of 2020. So the plans were quickly kind of reconceived to be an emergency response effort across a set of partners, and to make sure that those relief resources were actually hitting the ground and hitting underinvested entrepreneurs. So in the first phase of the pandemic, the coalition really allowed for trusted partners to share reliable information with their constituencies about PPP loans that were coming out, but a lot of the other mechanisms that were coming really quickly, and the regulations around support. And it also helped to inform the city's response. So by getting perspective from all of those partners around the table and really getting advice from each of us based on where we sat in the system, it helped the city to design grant programs for emergency relief that specifically filled in the gaps where PPP was not reaching, hitting businesses and constituencies that were being left out of those structures. And so we really right away, or especially over time, as that group was getting a lot of momentum and coordination, we really saw shifts in the patterns that we frequently see in large and complex investment structures, where folks are often marginalized or disinvested. So specifically Black and brown owned businesses. Baltimore is over 60% Black city. And so it's an incredibly important way for us to hold ourselves accountable to impact, is making sure that those business owners are getting resources. And what we saw over time is that the coalition, because of its reach and its relationships on the ground, was helping to improve resource flow to Black and brown owned businesses, but also into neighborhoods that were outside of what Baltimore calls the white L, which is, you can still see a lot of concentration, but you can see also out into what Baltimore calls the Black Butterfly, which are sort of the East and West Baltimore neighborhoods. And so we actually saw resources go out, which is great. And the other thing that that has done over recent months is the Technical Assistance Network has really shifted to become a working group for the city's 5-year strategy on small business support and of the larger economic development strategy. It's been this huge boost for our ability to coordinate and align on our approaches. And the coalition model really enables all stakeholders to put their best strengths forward. From my perspective, I think the BDC really this was sort of the first time that they were working in this type of really robust partnership. We've seen it generate a lot of enthusiasm and learning inside of a large economic development agency that for a long time has been focused on kind of big win or quick win kind of top down models of growth. And that outside funding that was coming in from the philanthropic side really helped to hold them accountable to their goals around equity. It also catalyzed new systems internally for them to be working with partners, but also tracking and measuring equitable outcomes. So that the maps and charts that you see here are actually new tools that were developed because of these partners coming together around that goal. And then from my perspective, being part of that coalition really capitalized on our unique networks and expertise, not only as Impact Hub, but our partners. And we've seen ways that partner coordination has increased even outside of the coalition meetings to really get aligned on our priorities and strategies. So that's that example I wanted to share. Another example comes from one of our really close partners. Ignite Capital is led by Innovation Works. This is a mechanism that's very much driven from the ground up with high touch ties to Baltimore entrepreneurs and communities. Ignite Capital is headed up, like I said, by our good friends at Innovation Works. It started out as providing programming and technical assistance to social entrepreneurs at multiple stages. They work with the Miller Center in California to bring a global acceleration model into the local context. And they stood up their Ignite Capital Fund to bring more flexible capital to those constituencies. Their programming is really letting them build close relationships with social entrepreneurs through their incubation acceleration programs. And then the Ignite Capital Fund really enables them to follow up on those technical supports with targeted investments that are designed to meet that entrepreneur where they are. It's addressing a specific gap in the system that we often see around friends and family funding being available for early stage entrepreneurs who may not come from generational wealth that allows them to access a lot of friends and family funding to get off the ground and build and scale. So Ignite Capital is coming in the form of grants and low interest loans, and they're really tailoring each one of the deals to work with the businesses that they support and meet those businesses and their goals. Ignite Capital is really one of several different funding mechanisms that have been launched over the past year, although seeded in long conversations and bodies of work that are allowing money to really start to address systemic inequities in new ways, particularly in access to capital. So what we're seeing as a common thread between a few of these examples on the slide here are being more community driven in the way that they're building capital models. So the initiatives are doing a lot to shift funding closer to the ground, to build on trusted relationships, and really acknowledge the power and the wisdom of community members that have lived experience with a lot of the city's most complex challenges. So each of these community capital mechanisms centers underinvested entrepreneurs and communities in their decision-making processes. And they've done a lot of really inspiring work over the last year to get hundreds of thousands of dollars of new investment into the hands of folks who really need it the most and are in a position to use it the best. Incredibly, each of the initiatives that are named here and earlier have actually been founded or led by people who've been part of Impact Hub Baltimore for many years. So a lot of this work has been crafted by our founding members, our founding supporters and funders, our advisors, and each operates with a different model, but are bound together by this common vision for driving equity and opportunity. We're really proud to be in community with thought leaders that are like setting new bars for impact and building these groundbreaking models. A couple takeaways from that is just there's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure we'll get to it in the discussion too. If anyone has questions about each of these models, and there's more where that came from. But to wrap up, I just wanted to leave you all with a few takeaways. One is that the initiatives for impact investing really can drive racial equity, but also civic wealth, and that it's helpful for folks designing new initiatives to be thinking about enterprise growth, but also beyond enterprise growth into the larger city context. We've seen firsthand that multiple stakeholders are able to build even stronger outcomes. Coalitions are letting people really bring their unique strengths to the table, and we love that form of collaboration. And resources have got to shift closer to the ground, and as they do, you can see that there's huge capacity from entrepreneurial networks and grassroots leaders to actually direct capital where it's needed most. It also lets them leverage trusted relationships that they've built over long time, and that all together kind of adds up to a stronger system. Trust matters. This is something we've seen more than ever in the last year, and we have to account for it if we're going to talk about driving equitable outcomes. And then finally, just let's think beyond the tools we already have, and just kind of keep pushing forward to get capital into the hands of folks that will make great use of it and change their communities. So that's it for me. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm seeing a lot of comments and questions coming from both of our platforms, and there seems to be a lot of a lot of people connecting with civic wealth at the core. It seems like that's the string that we just hit in the last few minutes of your chat. So thank you so much. So if you guys are just joining us on either of the platforms, welcome to Investing 2030. We've just heard from Michelle Gaze, co-founder at Impact Hub Baltimore. Prior to that, we heard from Terry Barreiro, Impact Hub Minneapolis. And up next, we are going international. We have Alfredo Villalonga, Impact Hub co-founder at Impact Hub Monterrey, who will be sharing more information about what their hub is doing and how you're providing unique ways of incorporating impact investing for your community. Welcome, Alfredo.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for the invitation, and I am very glad to share. I will be sharing also some slides. My name is Alfredo. I am co-founder of Impact Hub Monterrey, and I am also part of the board member of the board of Impact Hub Global. So I will give a perspective from the local part that it is very important, our communities, to the global effort that we are doing as Impact Hub to scale our impact. And for this, I will choose the mission that we have for 2030. That's something very, very important. Now, how we stopped in 2020. In 2020, many things stopped, and a lot of reflections came to our mind. And this is a picture of Impact Hub in the 2020. We were in 100 places. We support more than 16,000 entrepreneurs in 55 countries. And in total, in our survey, we collect that we were making impact in more than 21 million people. These are huge numbers around the world. And what is going to be the role of Impact Hub for 2030? First, you can see, and it is being repeated in the different Impact Hubs, to have entrepreneurial communities. For us, one of the center of our decisions is the entrepreneurs, are our communities. In our communities, you can see that we can go with corporations to governments of the public sector, NGOs, foundations, and very important, with investors, because we find in here a way of our entrepreneurs to grow, how to invest in the impact that it is going around the world. The second one is to develop a locally root. You have seen that we are doing a lot of effort in a locally root community, and how can we connect to a global pipeline. And one of those efforts, we can see it in this panel. How can we connect around the world? How can we grow and scale the impact? How can we share the solutions? We have an scaling infrastructure. You can see it from the past slide that we have around the world different impact hubs. And something important is how we support different solutions to scale to other parts of the world. And finally, engage a movement. More, if you see, more than being a business, an NGO, or something like that, Impact Hub is trying to be a global movement to engage people to make impact. And in part of that are the investors. We have our values, that is trust, courage, and collaboration. You can hear it from this panel. Each one of us are telling them. And we have these columns, the impact hubs, our community as something in the center, and society. To do what? A just and sustainable world where business and profit are used in service of people and planet. And in there is our impact focus. We have these three major parts: the impact enterprises, the impact makers, and the collaborate at scale that we are telling. Going from the local part, we have these different programs. Gender equality is something very important to Impact Hub and for Monterrey. Each Impact Hub is working in their context. And for us, gender equality is very, very important. And for us, the reduction of inequalities goes for all the people from indigenous communities that are arriving to Monterrey. How can we provide opportunities? And we create programs, entrepreneurship programs, so they can build their own ventures and have their economic development and their social inclusion. So each Impact Hub reacts and may impact to their local context. And then we are trying to find out or finding out ways to share this and to scale. And all of this is presented to different kind of investors. And here are the communities that we are working with: youth people, people with disabilities, women, people from rural areas, and social tourism projects. These are the different communities around Impact Hub Monterrey from a local context. And then we can find different parts of the pipeline for investing. If we go for the local programs, that it is Semillero Empresarias, the Raíz, or for the youth, that is Impact Team, we find in the public sector, in the municipality, the principal investors for these ventures. Why? Because they are solving local context problems with their solutions. So for the public sector is one of our principal partners in Monterrey, because our entrepreneurs are supporting them to solve real problems in our context. Then we go to Impacto Latam, where 12 impact hubs in the region, we are participating, and one of the sessions is to be ready for investment. And then we can go to the biggest or the largest program that runs around 24 countries in Impact Hub, that it is Accelerate 2030, and it is hosted by Impact Hub Geneva. And in Impact Hub Geneva, we do it at the same time of UNDP with their SDG Finance Summit, where the entrepreneurs can find global investors to do global solutions. And this has happened several times. So if you look at our strategy, it is happening just what we are trying to do with our pipeline of entrepreneurs. In the local context, we have the public sector solving. Then in the regional part, we have Impacto Latam, and our principal partner in there is IDB. It is one of them. UNICEF, it is one of them. And they are looking how to develop different entrepreneurs in the region. And finally, Accelerate 2030 with a global organization as it is UNDP. And in that part, this doesn't mean that UNDP is directly investing to the entrepreneurs, but they are connecting impact investors to the entrepreneurs. And this is something very important, because we have seen the work that we are doing with our local communities, and how can we scale these impact solutions with the support of global investors. And that is one, or that is the mission of Impact Hub. And well, thank you. Any question, you can send it to us. And I go back with Michelle.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. And yes, we have a lot of commentary that keeps coming in from both platforms. Thank you so much for sharing the work that you're doing. I actually was recently connecting with the local community in Impact Hub Monterrey a few weeks back. So it's always great that we know that we're not just in our neighboring countries, but also all around the world, that we have an impact hub mostly in every country that we can connect to. So thank you, Alfredo. So up next, we'd like to welcome Grace Rodriguez to share a little bit of the work that we're doing at Impact Hub Houston.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you all for joining us today for this. It's been really impactful and eye-opening for me. I think what a lot of people might not understand is that each of our impact hubs operates as its own organization. So sometimes we're not aware of everything that everybody does. And just to see how much each of your hubs are doing, each of you are doing, it's incredible. I totally feel you. So to give you all an idea of some of the things that we're doing, we're also talking with a few community partners because we're newer. We started in at the end of 2018. But in terms of the types of programs that we're doing for our community in Houston, they're still in development. So we'll have a few things that we're announcing over the upcoming weeks, but you'll hear a little bit more from those community partners in terms of a micro VC fund with Diversity Fund Houston, and potentially working with Next Seed on getting more access to capital for Main Street and brick and mortar businesses here in Houston. And they'll be speaking this afternoon as well. But in the meantime, one of the things that we did last year to be able to provide access to funding, to any kind of funds for a lot of our entrepreneurs and small businesses and nonprofit organizations or just starting organizations was fiscal sponsorship. And that was because, there are a lot of people who are reaching out and looking for grants. There were a lot of grants that were being available for humanitarian services, but not necessarily for the type of work that a lot of these different entrepreneurs wanted to do. So we launched our fiscal sponsorship program last year to help people to help companies, to help startups that are for profit access grants that they might not have been able to because they're earmarked for 501c3s. And as a result, we were able to launch the Life Fund, which helped pay local restaurants, to support local restaurants, and buy food from them to deliver to healthcare workers to make sure that they were getting support as well. We were also able to sponsor the Texas Female Founders Day, which was started with Watch Your Work and Got Spot. And it was so uncanny how it just launched during South by Southwest. And so it was right at the beginning of all of this happening. And then we worked with Re3D on raising funds for PPE for the people, with the idea that there were a lot of small businesses in marginalized communities and underserved, under-resourced communities that needed PPE or personal protective equipment. And so Re3D has a community of makers that were able to create personal protective equipment for a lot of those people who needed it but maybe couldn't afford it, especially with surging prices and often price gouging during those early months. We were also able to sponsor Greentown Houston for launching their Clean Tech Accelerator here, and you might have seen their grand opening in the past couple weeks too. But moving from that, our current campaigns are for the Black Marketing Initiative. We're raising funds for helping them to evolve into the Black Business Lab. Their goal is to support more Black and local entrepreneurs, and we're also supporting Amazing Bonds Senior Connect program with the intent of helping them get access to funds to help connect more seniors with more young people, and the benefit is on both sides. So you're seeing for all of these different entrepreneurs who are taking on these initiatives, they're trying to help they're trying to help beneficiaries, but they're also trying to help people who could be customers or clients, so that they can create sustainable models. And then the other thing that we have done over the past year was start working with corporate partners on maybe if they are not able to provide direct funding to entrepreneurs, they can also sponsor entrepreneurs. So how can they pay for things that entrepreneurs need? And one example of that is our partnership with Frost Bank, where they paid for a cohort of female founders to go through our Accelerate program, and that just launched. And so we're thinking, okay, if can other partners help provide scholarships or micro grants through us to those founders, to especially women and minority founders here in Houston, who might not have access to capital otherwise, for whatever reason. So those are just two campaigns that we currently have. We'll keep everyone posted if you sign up for our newsletter or if you connect with us on social media to make sure that you know when we launch new opportunities to get access to funding. Honestly, after learning everything that everybody's doing, I want to make sure there's a lot more time for discussion and for questions, because I have a lot too. I'd love to learn more about how do we really incorporate this idea of civic wealth into what we do in terms of ecosystem building? How do we make sure that more people are able to participate in investing in impact so that they can grow wealth as well? One of the challenges that we saw over the past 2 years was with the rise of opportunity zones. And because Houston is such a real estate, a strong economy and ecosystem, there was a lot of concern about would this accelerate gentrification in the 5th, 2nd, and 3rd wards, and predominantly Black and Brown communities. And the challenge for a lot of people who are in those communities is that it takes millions of dollars to develop these different types of multi-use complexes, to acquire the land, to be able to do things on them. So they weren't able to participate in those opportunity zones opportunities. So how do we make sure that there are people who are from the community can participate in the economic development in that community? How can we help make sure that young people have a brighter future ahead of them, that they can look forward to investment in them rather than looking at these hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans that they're going to be in debt with? So I have so many questions that I'm looking forward to this discussion. So thank you all.
Well, that's a perfect segue, Grace. Apologies if you guys hear any noise in the background. As you know, working from home, someone just literally started drilling in my kitchen sink. So we had a very wide range of examples that were just shared with us from the various impact hubs as north as Minnesota and down to Monterrey. But one of the things that already stood out to me, as you guys can see, versus this is not a traditional impact investing conference. We're not sitting here to talk about the term sheets. We're not sitting here to talk about the work behind the desk in our Excel sheets. We're really digging into the community aspect of what it really means to invest in impact. And so I just want to thank all of our panelists today for sharing that. I'd like to start off with a question for Terry. So Terry, you talked a lot about one of the things that really stood out in your presentation is that there's an intentionality around building that strong ecosystem of the various institutions, community organizations that need to come together for really developing a strong investing ecosystem in your city. What have been some of the challenges that you've faced as you guys have been working towards that in the last few years?
Do you have a couple hours? The thing I think that in looking back over the time, we didn't want to create a formal organization and a formal structure and then spend all our time trying to maintain that. So it's a loose configuration with the steering committee that acts as a impact investing community of practice. So they meet together and continue to talk about how to do their work better. But at the same time, the agenda also is what can we do to help continue to promote different strategies that will build the ecosystem. And then it really depends on each individual or each institution's momentum and what it is they're willing to pick up and run with. And then when somebody raises their hand and said, I really want to do it, then we gather around and try and figure out the resources we can bring to bear to help them do that. Some of the major challenges are the reality that it has been more difficult to prove to people that an investment that is value driven has a equal or better return than an investment that's only profit driven. That information world has changed. The other thing that's changed relatively recently is the pressure from investors who are demanding that their dollars be invested in strategies that have an impact. They moved from don't do damage with my money to make a difference with my money, and that has enabled smaller venture pools of dollars to be able to be developed. It's also enabled larger institutions that primarily would be just focused on making sure the return on the investment worked for them. They've begun to realize that they need to change the way they're doing it. One of the challenges that we have is that the investment world is predominantly white men. And so one of the issues that we have taken on in collectively is identifying new strategies, internship opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities, ways to engage graduate students of color in understanding what the field is and how to get into it. We got a long way to go though, but more women are involved and more people of color are beginning to understand the industry and think it's possible career opportunities.
Thank you, Terry. And with that, guys, invite people to this event. It goes on till 5 p.m. Let's make this a more diverse audience so that we can be part of the conversation. If your friend is not already here, invite them to the next panel, please. Michelle, I actually have as a follow up to what Terry just mentioned in what you were sharing with Impact Hub Baltimore. You talked a lot about civic wealth and accountability and how these are really important for equitable investment and outcomes. How do we ensure that all the stakeholders are honest brokers? How do we know that everyone will play well with each other when we're building these partnerships?
That's a high bar. I think I think it's always sort of a work in progress. And like starting where there's nodes of like-minded people and just getting folks banded together who are like, yes, this is a direction we need to go in, even if we don't know every step along the way. And then I think a thing I've been focused on a lot, even in just like what's ahead of us in the next few years, is like how do the smaller actors in town, who are often the most kind of leading edge, visionary, and experimental folks, like um, join forces and like really lock arms to be like taking up a little more space than they might as individual actors, right? And so like um, one thing that we do in that vein is we have a little kind of biweekly, I don't know, gut check call with the heads of multiple different organizations that support social and creative entrepreneurs, where we just share information and share vision and try to troubleshoot around things. And I think that's like a really important kind of source of strength for that when you go back up the um, ladder in the system to institutions, that you're more organized, that you know what you're trying to ask for, that you can help to set priorities, and that you're not just kind of one small organization saying this, but you're now sort of a chorus of small organizations saying, listen, like there's a better way forward, or this is what needs to change. Um, and then I think at the institutional level, I'd love to see more like just measurement and tracking around, just disaggregating your data, set some honest targets, and be able to track them. This is both for the sort of public sector as well as private sector, as well as philanthropic sector. Anybody that's kind of getting resources out the door. Um, Sometimes they'll require a lot of reporting standards from people who are receiving funds, but don't necessarily measure the same things internally. And so, like, let's kind of come up with a set of metrics that we're all using that are both applicable to the enterprise level, but also the community level, and also the sort of institutional level. Whatever is going on also inside of the culture of institutions is going to be replicated in community. And so I think there's a conversation now, and that needs to continue to be a part of our accountability process, to distinguish between setting goals and solidarity statements and these sorts of plays, which are really important, but also like actually doing the work, and knowing that there are layers and layers of kind of shifting from systemic racism, systemic disinvestment. These are patterns that have been ingrained and intentionally ingrained for a long time. So to undo them, it takes a lot of intentionality. So like people need to be prepared to get beyond the optics of it and really work internally, take care of your people, your staff that way, take care of, and that will, and also be in, whatever you say behind closed doors and do behind closed doors is also going to be reflected in how you show up in community.
Yes.
And I think at the community level, that it's like being aware that these conversations are going on, and starting to figure out the language and the implications and where you fit in, and really kind of show up, and also take up some space and get organized. Because I think um, we can sometimes forget how much movements influence policy, and policy all starts in movement building. So even if somebody feels like one little voice in the wilderness, chances are there's somebody else that feels that. And so just being connected to other people and leaning on each other for support, I think, is kind of, there's work in I showed all those circles of enterprise, community, and institution. I think there's similar work, but sort of different work in each of those realms that all need to look like sort of alignment and then accountability.
I love that. Thank you, Michelle. And Alfredo, I have a question for you. So you talked a lot about intentionality around having locally rooted programs, but that are connected to a full pipeline of investment. And specifically, I noticed that that pipeline is also tied to entrepreneurial education, depending on the different stages. So, what's some advice that you have for folks on the call on how we could potentially began to replicate that type of model here in Houston or wherever we're located?
Well, my recommendation is to join the nearest Impact Hub, and that's a start. We have 4 steps for each person, for each idea. We start with idea, startup, growth, and scale. And all that methodology are part of the Impact Hub. And I am sure that and this is something that I like to say a lot, that if you don't know what to do, but you don't like something of your context, now you have something to do. And Impact Hub is a great space, and we have great methodology to bring that ideas to life and make impact. So I will just say that.
Me encanta. Well said. Grace, so we have a final question. I'm going to address this one to Grace. If somebody wants to get started in impact investing, where should they start, especially if they don't have millions of dollars? I think somebody read my mind and I typed that question in because I had the same one.
That's a really good question, and I feel like referring back to what Alfredo said, first get involved with your local impact hub because it seems like we're all doing stuff with our local ecosystems and can plug you into maybe some activities that are helping people invest in impact. It brings me back to a conversation we had during prep where Michelle and I were talking about it's not the conversation isn't about impact investing, right? It's not just for angels and venture capitalists to invest in impact startups or impact ventures. It's really about how do we redefine investing in impact. And that investment can be money, it can be time, it can be your thought leadership, it can be your access to your community and that trust that is so critical at this time, to develop relationships. So there are a lot of different ways that you can invest in your community. If you don't have millions of dollars and you want to start seeing returns on investment, so with some monetary investment, you can do something that's as small as just beginning to create the habit of saving. And whether that's starting, I keep telling people about T-Mobile Money because they provide a 4% interest rate on cash if you open an account and keep it there. And that's better than any CD or a money market account that I've seen right now. But if you just put something into a money market account or a savings, an interest bearing account, great. If you want to bet a little bit and be a little more speculative and do the Bitcoin thing, and everybody's talking about Dogecoin right now, I would say don't do too much, but you can go on Robinhood and try start there. But it's really about education, and you don't get to learn as well unless you try it, and you don't have to try with a lot of money, right? You just have to start investing in some way. You can also bring people together, right? And so that's the idea of crowdfunding. You can create an investment circle or in a lending circle where a group of you, and this happens a lot in immigrant and refugee communities, a group of you say, okay, we have each of us have $100 or each of us have $500. What if we gave it to this entrepreneur or to this, this woman in our community who wants to start a childcare system, which would help all of us, right? As we're going back to work now. So let's give her money to start this business. If anybody has skills to help her, automate some things and all of that and help her with bookkeeping and accounting things, then let's set her up with that too. And then once, she is able to pay that back, give her very favorable terms to pay that back. Once she pays that back, then we can take that and put it into another entrepreneur, right? So there's just so many different ways of thinking about how you can put resources into people who are solving problems. It doesn't have to be, just angel or VC investment.
Thank you, Grace. And thank you to all of our panelists. We are out of time, but don't worry, guys. If you're in our audience and if you're in our Zoom, we're going to open up to breakout rooms so you can continue to have this conversation. Our speakers are welcome to hang around if you have a few more minutes, but otherwise, thank you guys so much for all the insight that you've provided. Thank you for introducing our Extended Impact Hub community to our local residents in Houston, and we hope that we can increase the collaboration.